Today we are going to take a look at another way that we can graph linear equations. Okay, and the format that we're going to talk about today is point-slope form. And point-slope form, just like the format slope-intercept form, right, has a formula. And it looks a lot longer, but don't feel overwhelmed. It's pretty straightforward because we've already learned about several of these letters. Sorry guys, I keep kicking the table. Okay, the m value right here is still going to be the slope of our line. So it's still going to tell us how steep a line is, right? How much it goes up, how much it goes down. Okay, the other thing that we can get, right, this is called point slope form. So we have a slope. The other thing that we can get is a point. Now, when we're looking at this ordered pair, this point, it's x sub 1 comma y sub 1, which means everything about it is a little bit backwards. So while the x comes at the end of the equation, it's going at the beginning of the ordered pair. And while the y sub 1 comes at the beginning, it's coming at the end of the ordered pair. The other thing that we are really going to have to pay attention to is these signs in the formula. Okay, there are subtraction signs in this formula, and what we need to understand is in the math world, we've already talked a lot about how we can read this as a subtraction or we can read this as a negative. The other thing is that we can also read it as an opposite. Okay, so when we're writing it down here, it's going to tell us to take the opposite sign. So if it looks like a positive, we're going to have to write it as a negative. And if it looks like a negative, we are going to have to write it as a positive. Okay, so our main objective is going to be that we can just identify those two key things. Can we find the point? Can we find the slope? So let's say we are given the equation y minus 4 equals 1/2 times x minus 3, right? There are two things that we can find. We can find a point and we can find a slope. Okay, slope is always where the m is located. So m is in front of the parentheses. So the number here in front of the parentheses is 1/2. So our slope is going to be 1/2. Okay, our point is always an ordered pair. So it has two numbers at play. Okay, where one of them is going to be what's from my x over here, and one of them is going to be from what's in my y over here. I'm taking the opposite sign. So while this looks like a -3, I'm going to write it down as a +3. And while this looks like a -4, I'm going to write it down as a +4. Okay, and that's all there is to it. Those are our two things. Okay, so let's look at another one. So let's say we have y minus 7 equals 2 times x plus 5. Okay, so there's two things that we can find. Again, we can find a point and we can find a slope. Right? Makes sense. It's called point-slope form. Again, our slope is always what's right in front of those parentheses. So our slope here is going to be 2. Our point, again, is x value first. So what's sitting over here with the x goes first. Now it looks like a +5, but we are taking the opposite sign. So if it looks like a positive, we are going to write it down as a negative. So same thing for our y. If it looks like a negative, we are going to write that down as a positive. One more here. Now, if we don't see a number in front of the parentheses, right, keep in mind that this still functions under our basic math rules. So if we don't see a number in front of the parentheses, there's really a 1 there. So we know that our slope is 1. And our point has an x value that is the opposite sign. So a positive becomes a negative. and a positive 4 becomes a negative 4. Now, we can really do this in either order. So whether we are finding the point and the slope, or whether we are plugging in the point and the slope, we should be able to go both ways. So I should also be able to say, okay, well, what if my slope is 2/3 and my point is 4, 5? Okay, so if we're given these two things, we should be able to plug back into the formula. Okay, so we have that formula that I gave you. And we know that an ordered pair, we've talked about this multiple times, is x comma y, but we only have one ordered pair. This is our first one, so it's getting that sub 1. Okay, we should then be able to go across and start plugging into our formula. Okay, where we're just going to replace each letter with its new assigned number. Okay, so I'll say y minus, but y sub 1 is now equal to 5. Okay, so it was a positive, but now it looks like a negative, equals m, which we know is 2/3, times x minus, and our x sub 1 is 4. Right, so there's our equation of the line. I just went in the backwards order of what we were just practicing on the previous examples. Okay, so I could say m equals -3, and I want it to pass through the point -2, -7. So again, I'm using that same point slope formula. And I'll say y minus, again, right here's my ordered pair, just like we had up here. My y value is -7, so this -7 is still getting plugged in here. And I know some of you might be thinking to do something with that. We'll get to that in just a second. Okay, my m is -3. My x sub 1 is -2, so again, that negative's coming with it. Now, some of you might say, well, Mrs. McKinney, I just know that these two negatives make a positive. Or I know that if this is a negative, it needs to look like a positive here. That's absolutely fine. And that's what we would really do, right? These two negatives, it's the only time, right? Two wrongs make a right. And so we'd really write y plus 7 equals -3. And again, two negatives here times x plus 2. Okay, now, graphing in point slope form is exactly the same way that we graph in slope intercept form. So we were practicing graphing in slope intercept form. We don't need any new skills at this point, as long as we can identify that important information. So let's say we were asked to graph y minus 4 equals 1/2 times x plus 3. Just like any graphing that we have done, our first step is going to be to find that important info. So in this case, we want to find the point and the slope. Okay, so exactly what we've been practicing. So we'll say, okay, our slope, our m, is 1/2. Our point, remember, we're taking the opposite sign. So it looks like a +3. I'm writing a -3. It looks like a -4, so I'm writing a +4. Okay, I'm just finding that important information. My second step is then going to be to plot the point. Just like we have been plotting points since we were in elementary school. Okay, we will plot the point, -3, +4, right? An ordered pair is always x, comma y, right? This is our x-axis. This is our y-axis. Okay, once we have that ordered pair, then we are going to just count rise over run, just like we did with slope intercept form. So since our slope is 1/2, from this point, not from the origin, not from anywhere else in the coordinate plane, right? From this point, we are going to go up 1 over 2. We only need those 2 points, but if I count one more time, I can really make sure my line is nice and straight and I didn't miscount anywhere. However, in Aleks, it kind of makes your line perfectly straight for you anyways. Okay, and there is our line. So we look at another one of those just to make sure we're really good, right? Let's say we want to do y plus 3 equals negative 2 times x minus 1. So we'll find our important information. So our slope is negative 2. For our point, right, we want the opposite sign. So a negative 1 turns into a positive 1. A positive 3 turns into a negative 3. So I will then plot the point 1, negative 3, right? This is my x-axis. This is my y-axis. I'm plotting that point 1, negative 3. Now I need to take into account my slope. Now, my slope currently just says m is negative 2, which is not a fraction. And just like we had to fix it previously, if it's not a fraction, we are just going to put it over 1 to make it a fraction, right? Those are math skills we've known for a very, very long time as well. So again, whenever we have a negative number, if we have a negative number in the top, it's telling us to go down, and a negative number in the bottom is telling us to go left. So we have a negative over a positive. So we're going to go down 2, right 1. So from this point, I'm going to go down 2, right 1. Down 2, right 1. And again, you can make 2 points, you could make 10 points, whatever. And there is our line. Okay, so you are going to be logging into Aleks and completing some practice with point slope form. Just as a reminder, that will be in the grade book now that we've sort of altered and changed how we're doing things with e-learning. Have a great rest of the day. I will check in with you tomorrow.